I'm Jim Check with Kelowna Now,
And I'm Renee Merrifield.
and we're here with Beyond the Ballot. Lots again to talk about. Just like it seems like there's never,
Jim, I
and
can't
like
believe we're
there's so
going to
much,
try
right?
and do this in a half an hour.
It's crazy. We're going to start with Bill 7,
Yeah.
David Eby, Premier Eby.
And as I said, to Jim just before we started, I think that this is one of those bills that British Columbians need to pay attention to. This is something that could be so life-changing that if we don't actually draw attention to it, we would be not doing our job in terms of this show. But Bill 7 came out last Thursday. It basically, kind of slid under the wire. There was a press conference that was held around it, but this is right before a 2-week break. So, the Legislative Assembly here in BC is now on a 2-week break for spring break. And this Bill 7 is probably one of the most far-reaching bills in terms of its power that I have ever seen in my life. I'm not talking about like in my political life, in my entire life. It's called the Economic Stabilization Act, and
Cool name.
Yeah, super cool name. And what Eby promoted it as, and Nikki Sharma, who introduced the bill, our Attorney General, is that it was promoted as it's seeking to grant British Columbia government extensive powers to swiftly counteract economic threats, particularly those arising from the escalating U.S. tariffs. Now, this bill assumes that BC could do anything to actually affect this positively, but it allows Eby and the cabinet to make any decision they want, to enact any legislation or regulation that they see fit, and they do not have to go to the Legislative Assembly for ratification. They can do it unilaterally with a cabinet decision. Now, this also, if I was an NDP backbencher, you are out of conversation. You are out of what the government is doing. It basically goes to
The core
Eby
there.
and his cabinet to make all of those decisions. They don't have to call the Legislative Assembly back. They can make any number of decisions that they possibly want and never has to go to vote. And basically, when Eby was pressed on it, said, well, the people of British Columbia can just, this is a confidence vote, so the people of British Columbia can just choose to go to an election and vote me out. So that is the only recourse that British Columbians have. And even in the actual bill, it gives them the ability to override any rights, any liabilities. The court system is completely extricated out of any legislation or legislative checks and balances. So this is the most sweeping piece of legislation that I have ever seen, giving full power and autonomy to a premier and cabinet. That is a razor-thin majority right now, and I think is a very, very dangerous piece.
I guess the question that some people are asking is like, why do we have a legislature, even our parliament? It seems like the Liberal government and the NDP government seem to be want to be drunk on power, where they don't have to deal with legislature and they don't have to deal with parliament. And because democracy is messy, right? That's you go in there and you hash things out, right? And like you say, it even takes out the backbenchers in the NDP, not just the Conservatives or the Green Party. It takes out basically everybody out of the equation. It's a really tight circle of people, and realistically, David Eby making the decisions, right?
And this is, each of those MLAs that are sitting there, whether you're in opposition, whether you're sitting as an independent, whether you're a small party like the Greens, or whether you're a part of the backbench of the NDPs or in cabinet, your duty, your job is to represent your constituents first. Right. What this does is it silences anyone outside of cabinet. And, it's almost a little eerie that, Eby gave all of these cabinet positions as his first act and then did nothing for 3 months. Right. And then comes out with Bill 7. There's only been 7 pieces of legislation, and 3 of those will be, throne speech and budget related. Bill 7 is this sweeping power that he is giving to cabinet. I think this is incredibly insane. And he's saying he needs this in order to be able to react quickly to whatever Trump throws at us. The reality is not another premier across Canada needs this. He has a majority. Use Parliament, use the Legislative Assembly, use the system of government and checks and balances that we have in Canada here. And literally, this is a law that would go and circumvent that entire that entire process.
Yeah, and when he talks about it being necessary for the economy and that almost everything the government does deals with the economy. So you can just basically say almost everything, right? So I mean, it's really, other than, a few things, like maybe like the holidays that he speaks on, like really what is the purpose of the legislature then? Like, let's sell that building.
Yeah, and when we talk to the economy is in dire straits in BC. Everyone knows it, everyone feels it. We are, 9th out of 10 in terms of predictions on all of the chief economists across Canada. This is not a good time for BC, but Trump did not get us here. Eby's government got us here. Yeah. And so for him to now say that he needs ultimate power and authority to be able to react to these economic times, I think is so disingenuous and really scapegoating Trump. Now, dear God, there are so much that I could say about Trump. So please, we can get started on that as our next topic of conversation. But this is not the answer. This is actually basically becoming what you are accusing Trump of being, which is authoritarian and neglecting your elected citizens.
It doesn't make any sense. And like our inflation up again in Canada, 2.6, and in BC higher as well. The GDP per capita in BC has definitely been lagging. And these things have been around long before Trump. The investment capital, you and I talked about it so many times, the investment capital fleeing British Columbia has been here long before Donald Trump took office.
And it's going to get worse. Carney, through regulation, not through law, the carbon tax still exists because he has not called Parliament back yet. But through regulation, zeroed out consumer carbon tax. So our inflation numbers are actually going to get worse. Here in BC, that has not happened. Eby has to go to the Legislative Assembly. That's not going to be possible before April 1st because they don't even get back until just before that. And I think March 31st or April 1st is their first day back in the Legislative Assembly. So we're not going to see any activity on that. And so our inflation numbers are going to continue to skyrocket as we still pay carbon tax and the rest of Canada is not. Now, also, Eby is in trouble. He has said that he will remove carbon tax. That is and by my rough math, Brenda Bailey, the finance minister, just came out with her numbers. 199 million is what industry pays in terms of carbon tax. So 199 million of 3 billion, we've got a $2.8 billion gap. Even if they remove the carbon tax rebate, which is about 800 million, we still have a $2 billion gap in our revenue for our budget. That means that instead of that $11 billion deficit, we are now in a $13 billion deficit, which I think is catastrophic for a province that has an economy that's barely sputtering.
And then he wants power to basically run the economy without any oversight, which is, doesn't make a lot of sense.
Look at where the oversight got us to. I mean, honestly, we are in dire straits. And, this Bill 7 is a bizarre, even some of the pundits that are left of center or left wing, I would call them, like the Von Palmers of the world, wrote one of the most scathing articles I've ever seen. It was actually what tweaked me to Bill 7 and had me do investigation, is that I saw the Von Palmer article and I was like, what could Eby do that would be so detrimental that Von Palmer would write such a scathing article? And honestly, once I read that article and then went and read the actual Bill 7, it was worse than I thought. There was nothing that could pull back that power outside of an election. There was no way to trigger that election, but because he doesn't have to call a legislative assembly. This is the most bizarre bill I've ever seen, and I think we need to sound the alarm bell. We need to get loud, write your MLAs, talk to your friends, get on social media. We need to draw attention to Bill 7 being insanely detrimental to our future here in BC.
He would argue, though, that he said that there is an end date for this May 2027, which they could just obviously extend because he has this far-reaching powers and he could extend it forever, just like we did with COVID too.
Yeah, that's, no.
And this is another one, this is a laser focus on our community here in Kelowna. Kelowna makes another top 10 list, actually number 1 on the list in northwestern North America here for highest property crime per capita. Oh. And the number 1 for 49 number 2 for 300 urban centers in US and Canada. Number 1. So a lot of that has to do with Eby's lax on crime, property crimes especially, and even on the drug policies. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
this goes right to our this goes right to our laws. This goes right to our prosecutors who are just not prosecuting property crimes. This goes right to our police force who are completely powerless and have just given up on even trying to catch them, never mind prosecute them. And this goes back to our decriminalization policy and that like carte blanche that that Eby has given to certain portions of our society that choose to profit off of those citizens who are trying to live
Maybe put that
appropriately.
graphic up again, Rommel.
I've heard the stories, and when I served as an MLA, I was working specifically with certain neighborhoods. They would have 7, 8, 9 break-ins to cars on a given night. And we're talking about, where nothing was even stolen, just literally, windows smashed. And if you've ever had one of your windows smashed in your car, it takes weeks to actually get that repaired. And you're driving around with plastic on a window, et cetera, oftentimes with hundreds of dollars, even more than that. We've got criminals who are actually, arrested and they're re-released later on that afternoon. We have a detrimental system that is allowing really criminals to profit and criminals to wander our streets without any retribution.
And I've talked to quite a few young people, and that window, which is $200-300, is for them right now is the ability to make rent or buy food, right? So
absolutely,
like this senseless property crime, and like it's a lot of things, stolen bikes, all kinds of things, right? Property crime, break and enters, a lot of the theft in stores too, like shoplifting. I just watched a video just recently. 4 people went into a store and just basically just shoveled the stuff off the shelves into garbage buckets and walk out, right?
Well, and one of the store owners was telling me that one of his staff, chased someone who had stolen, chased them right to the RCMP office that's downtown there on Clement and Richter. And, out comes an officer because there's this tumult on the ground. And, the store clerk said, well, you have to arrest them. Look at everything that I said is in the backpack. And the RCMP officer looked and said, well, then I have to arrest you for assault because you actually tackled him. And I mean, the disheartenment on that, store clerk that, he had saved this thousands of dollars of goods for his enterprise. And in the end, just literally being told that he was going to be charged with assault and believing that assault charge would probably stick and the arrest and the property crime would not. We have an issue. We have an issue. And what I would like to see is all levels of government working on exactly these issues. It starts with federal governments and bail reform. It then goes to, our provincial governments and what our mandates are for our Crown prosecutors and our Crown Prosecution Service. We absolutely need to sound the alarm bell. We need more Crown prosecutors. We need more due diligence. Judging, we have so many judge vacancies right now. Our court system is overloaded, and our jails are not overloaded. Our jails are sitting at about 30% occupancy with a 70% available, and we need to do something to really, really fight this back.
Yeah, you and I talk about energy a lot, and that's one of the things that British Columbia could do a way better job of. And Adrian Dix just came out. He's the new, he's running that department now. We'll see what he does with that, right? Adrian Dix said that they're going to raise, BC Hydro is going to raise the electricity cost 3.75 on April 1 and another 3.75 in the following year. So no carbon tax, but the electricity rates are going up, right?
Yeah, and this is, for a government that has been very pro-electrification and pro-lowering of emissions, they quietly updated their website on the Clean BC site to say that our emissions actually went up by 3%. So whatever we are doing is not working. But in really making the case for electrification, people were told it's going to cost you less. When electricity rates go up, that is not going to cost you less. It's not going to cost you less for your heat pump that doesn't have natural gas and now runs exclusively on electricity. And it's not going to cost you less to charge your car that you were mandated to buy because 26% of all vehicles have to be electric by this next year and 90% by 2030. We are in a really tight catch-22. Our cost of living is going up. Our inflation is already up by 3.3%, higher than the rest of Canada, and this is going to further drive the cost of living higher. And clearly, this NDP government is out of touch with what the average citizen is really struggling with right now.
And the sad reality is that we have access to tons of LNG. Even if we don't have enough ourselves, we have lots from our neighbor next door, and it's cheap and it's effective, and it's something that Eby doesn't want to use.
And I was speaking with some house guests last night who were in town visiting, and and the conversation went around to all of these different issues, and they said, well, yeah, but Doug Ford, he punched back and was going to shut off electricity, and I was like, I was desperate to have Premier Ford stop talking, because BC imports, especially during the winter, imports our electricity from Washington State and Alberta. We import it from Washington State because they are using coal and natural gas to create it, and we can't create enough with our hydroelectricity because in the wintertime they're frozen and they're not running in the same way. So I'm sitting there going, we are so reliant on the US for our electricity production. We don't have, and then we don't have to count that coal burning or that LNG burning in our emissions. They get to count it in their emissions, which is why one of the reasons that Alberta's emissions are so high. But we get to benefit.
We can wag our finger at them, though.
Oh yeah, we can wag our finger and buy their electricity.
We can do the finger wag and benefit. There you go. And then talking about tit for tat stuff, Eby with his threat of charging trucks to go to Alaska, the senator from Alaska has reached back and said maybe the cruise ships that like BC relies on will just bypass BC ports.
Well, and the one thing that Eby needs to recognize is the Alaska Highway was actually built by the U.S. They paid for it, they built it, and in doing so, we signed a treaty way back when that said we would never charge United States vehicles for travel on that actual highway. So we would be going against international law. We could be tried at an international tribunal. And so Eby's threat is really, really nothing more than performative and a lot of hot air. That is not something that we could do without a lot of blowback from an international space, and one that I don't think that people would find too compelling on our part.
Let's switch gears to the federal side of the...
But can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
I want everyone to remember that during COVID, those cruise ships stopped coming. They stopped coming to Victoria and they stopped coming to Vancouver. The impact was massive to those cities and to the tourism dollars that were created. I don't think that we can underestimate what that threat actually means. Yeah. And there is a law that requires those cruise ships that are going from, let's say, Seattle to Anchorage, Alaska. They are required to stop right now in Canada, and that's what the pushback is. We can just remove that as law and actually not have them stop, and that's going to adversely affect your economy. It absolutely will adversely affect our economy.
All those people on those cruise ships are in one mode. They want to spend money because they're on vacation, right?
Totally.
And it's a tough loss for that too. In the federal side of things, though, Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, sounds like he's going to call an election, but he's getting a little bit of pushback on his non-disclosure. And here's a clip here that we're going to play with CBC Rosemary Barton asking the question about disclosure.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
You spend most of your time life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
There you go.
Oh, he is not liking that question. No prime minister should respond to a reporter with that amount of contempt and that amount of edge. This is a legitimate question, and when he answers back that he is complying with all of the rules, it means that he does not have to put anything in a blind trust yet. He could have everything outside of a blind trust because the rules only require you to put them into a blind trust 120 days after you've been elected. So he could have everything that he had before in the private sector, and he could completely be in a conflict of interest and still be complying with all of the rules to date, which is exactly what the question was from Ms. Barton. The fact that he pushes back and talks about ill will that she has for him and the look within is an absolutely inappropriate way to respond to a journalist. And I don't want to go into a gender specific conversation, but that was just a brutal look on a brand new prime minister.
Journalists don't like Donald Trump because he pushes back sometimes and actually berates reporters and journalists. This is just another form of berating a journalist. It's just it's done in a more, I guess, arrogant way, as opposed to, Trump is more like bullying, where he says you're stupid and your outlet is stupid, and he's basically just like arrogantly telling her she's too stupid and shouldn't be asking that question, and that she's making up new rules.
Yeah. I think that the prime minister has something to hide right now. If he didn't, he would answer it less about rules and more in line with everything is in a blind trust. I will fully disclose to everyone, here is my disclosure.
Right.
Do it preemptively. Like, you don't have to wait to be sworn in or be elected in to actually have.
What are you hiding is the question. Yeah. What are you hiding?
Like, disclose absolutely everything and file that disclosure right now and file it openly.
Whenever you get into a relationship with anybody, and you would say that he's in the number one relationship with Canadians, he wants to lead Canadians, so he's in this relationship. And if you get into a relationship with somebody, why wouldn't you want to get into it starting on the foundation of trust?
100%. I mean, I read one of the pundits, and this is actually a very left-leaning Globe and Mail journalist, who said after the fact that if that's how the prime minister answers, he's not going to be prime minister for long. That was an incredibly rude, condescending, and very, very defended way to respond, and really was not a good look on a prime minister. The other thing that I will say was not a good look on a prime minister is that his first trip after becoming prime minister is not to the rest of Canada to really rally the troops and project unity. It was not to defend our farming communities and the Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta farmers who are being decimated by China tariffs. It was not to sort of project this unification. It was to go to France and the UK. We are not huge trading partners. They are not, yes, they are allies, but definitely, the pomp and ceremony that was produced in that 24-hour trip, it certainly seemed like an unnecessary on where.
We have to remember that Mark Carney identifies as a European when he was asked, in an interview, who he is, and he says, "I'm a European." So he's very tight with these people over there. Like, that is his. I guess you'd say his club.
Yeah.
He's very tight with these people, and they have very similar ideals. And here's an exchange actually on the carbon tax, that they said they're getting rid of the carbon tax, and then here's an exchange with Mark Carney when asked about the carbon tax as well and why he's in Europe.
We have our largest trading partner, as we've been discussing, attacking us, putting tariffs on us. On the other hand, we have the opportunity to diversify trade. Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the European Union? Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the United Kingdom? Guess what one of the requirements will be to diversify trade to emerging Asia? Is to have a form of price on carbon.
Well,
he's not telling the truth. Yeah. He is not telling the truth. We do not need to have a formal price on carbon. The U.S. does not. Russia does not, China does not, and they are all selling LNG. They are all selling into Europe. This does not need to happen.
Europe is desperate for energy.
They are absolutely. So this is
Yeah.
this was so disingenuous, and I don't know who he thinks he's fooling. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, Jason Kenney was out almost immediately saying, "No, we signed 64 trade agreements and we did not have carbon tax. That is not a requirement." And so for him to say that, I think, be careful. This is his mantra, and I strongly encourage anyone that has not read his book, Values. Go out, find it, and read it. If you want to know what our prime minister is all about, he has basically written 300 pages to tell us.
Yeah, it's just the energy thing is such a tough thing because that's Canada's biggest export. That's what we have, right?
It is our magic. It's
Yeah.
what we need to be focused on.
It is really the biggest thing we have. Like there is nothing that even comes as a close second, and it isn't semiconductors, as he said. We don't sell semiconductors.
No, we don't create them.
And then when he said at the end there, he said, or to emerging Asia, and I'm just thinking Asia, China, and India, like together they have more than half the world's population.
Yeah.
They wouldn't require carbon tax.
No. Right? And really right now is the only thing to combat where we're at right now with our United States neighbor and with Trump is to get pipelines out to our ports and to get our energy and our resources to other trading partners. This, having carbon tax does not do that for us. It does not actually make us more attractive in any way, shape, or form. So it's completely disingenuous for him to say anything to that effect. Is basically because he believes so strongly in carbon pricing and how that lowers emissions. However, that has not proven true in BC, where our emissions have gone up, despite having one of the most aggressive forms of carbon tax in all of Canada.
And this goes full circle. The disclosure, Brookfield Asset Management. Part of that model is carbon credits. Do you know what I mean? So if he can get governments and that to buy carbon credits, and then part of that his company
company profits
sells carbon credits, and they've also been there's allegedly they've been cheating on their carbon credits as well.
Oh yeah, I mean Brookfield has. I mean you can Google it; it's public information. But they've been definitely accused of greenwashing and not actually being above board on some of their business practices. So not a great example. Definitely a conflict. Definitely something that should be disclosed. So if he is out there saying that we need a price on carbon, and at the same time still has his shares not in a blind trust with Brookfield or in any way could be in conflict, it should be disclosed, and we don't have that. Right
the last thing we're going to talk about, because we're just creeping over that half-hour mark, is this is surprising to many people. It looks like the Liberals are moving into majority territory, and but the real big loser though is the NDP.
Absolutely, the Liberals aren't taking a lot. I mean, they are taking some, but they're not taking a lot from the Conservatives. I have seen other polls that do not show the same result. But what I would say is that Carney's results will be the highest today than they will ever be.
It's a honeymoon, yeah.
This is a honeymoon phase. We saw that with Kamala Harris in the United States. It would look like she was going to swing to a full majority and win as president, and that was definitely not the case. So it will be very interesting. The other thing right now is that Carney's getting all the airtime, and once an election is called, there has to be equal airtime for the different leaders and the different parties. So that will definitely change the trajectory of where we're going and how how things look.
Trudeau, leadership crisis, that's what got him kicked out. If you look at this, though, do you think Jagmeet Singh, that the NDP should also be looking at a leadership crisis there?
100%. Jug needs to be gone. I don't know what he is doing for them right now, but it is certainly not anything good.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of gets up there all the time and says stuff that is like, it's almost like he makes you feel embarrassed as a Canadian when he says these things, and you're just like, really? Did you need to say that, right?
Yes, very much so.
And I think Kash Patel from the FBI, the new FBI director, said that if Jagmeet Singh goes to the United States, he'll be arrested and deported to India to face judgment there.
Wow. Well, I can't say I haven't read that one, so I don't know
that was from
one.
Kash Patel saying that the Indian government wants him for questioning.
Oh wow, that's scary times.
Yeah.
Scary times.
It's a weird world for sure. That's That's over our half hour. That's 40 minutes, and we're trying to keep this to 30 minutes. But there's so much to talk about.
There
all
is
the
so much to talk about. I don't know if every week. That's really hard. That's really, really hard.
Just a couple of small topics, I guess. I guess they're not small, but they're huge because they're of significance, though, in political realm. JFK files are supposed to be released today. And JFK is one of the most storied Democrats ever. And, it's been subject of so many conspiracy theories. I'm hoping we're going to get more documents than we got out of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, which was a nothing burger. There's supposedly more coming, but it would be good if they released all of it and didn't hold something back so it doesn't look like, again, a disappointment.
Yeah, I fully agree. I hope that we have more there. I'm probably more interested in the Jeffrey Epstein, especially with Mark Carney's alleged relationship there. Than I am on the JFK. JFK is kind of like over and done in my mind, but I totally understand that maybe not. But I do think that seeing some better things there would be better than not. I want to end on a little bit of a different note.
Sure.
There was an Ipsos poll out this last week that showed that 43% of our 18 to 34-year-olds would become Americans if there was the ability to have all of their assets equalized into an American dollar. Yeah. Scary number.
Disenfranchised kids.
We need to pay attention, and we need to do something that's pretty different.
They've been left behind.
They really have.
Hope for a house, almost gone. Hope for decent jobs, high taxation. It's really disenfranchising the youth for sure, right? Like, when I grew up, I knew I was going to buy a house. It just, it was a matter of when, right? Because houses were fairly reasonable, right? Like, it was rent and a house payment was very much the same, and the down payment wasn't. As for my first house, I think it was $10,000 down.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. Here's another one from that same poll. 20%, that's 1 in 5 Canadians, believe that unification with America is inevitable, and it is only a matter of time before Canada and the U.S. merge. Yeah. Again, really shocking statistic. And then the last one from that same poll, 27%, or over 1/4 of Canadians, believe that Quebec, Alberta, or both will separate from the rest of the country within the next 10 years. We need a strong prime minister who can actually unify us, give us a vision, and actually have us.
Well, 10 years of a post-national state by Justin Trudeau were saying that we didn't have an identity. It really didn't help. And it's just recently that they've tried to wrap the flag around themselves because it helps themselves. But until we address our youth here, we're not going to get that national identity that can't, it's very proud to be a Canadian. I remember even Jean Chrétien would said, we need more Canadas around the globe. But I would say many youth don't feel that way right now. So we need to fix it. We need to fix it well. Like, housing starts are down again.
Oh yeah, plummeted.
Housing starts, and GDP per capita is the one that most people look at. And if you look at the disparity between Canada and the US, that gap continues to grow. We used to be ahead of them there too, right?
We did.
There's something wrong. And when Eby blames just Trump for investment capital in BC, he needs to go look at the history of the last couple, 3-4 years and see it's been happening long before Trump. And we have to be honest with ourselves. People say, we shouldn't even talk about this. If we don't start being honest with what's wrong with Canada, how are we going to fix it?
Agreed. 100%. It's a great way to end.
Yeah. And we do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.